Hello and welcome to the Gaggle Wobble Challenge, and if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle. So, Peter, the Gaza ceasefire is looking a little fragile.
Well,
Now,
one side is ceased and another side is firing. Okay.
exactly. Now, to be honest, none of this should be too surprising. We always suspected that Israel will find all sorts of ways to claim that the other side is violating the ceasefire and therefore it's entitled to do whatever it wants to do. Um, However, the pretext that Israel has used at the moment is probably one of its most threadbare ever. So threadbare was it, as we'll see, is that even the Trump administration was unconvinced by Netanyahu's arguments for launching its attacks on Gaza. Eventually, it was persuaded to support these attacks, but nonetheless, initially at least, they were very unpersuaded by Netanyahu's claim that Hamas has violated the ceasefire. Um, so there are these two basic claims that Israel has made. There's one that it says that somehow it was fired upon. For some reason, Hamas was fired upon by Hamas, something Hamas has denied. And the other there's a convoluted story about the reburial of the remains and then the exhumation of the remains of one of the dead hostages. It's a very murky story, and it's very unclear exactly what had happened because this was a body of a hostage that Israel had retrieved, but there were some of the remains were still with Hamas, and Hamas somehow buried those remains, then exhumed them for the sake of the Red Cross. It's, as I say, it's a very murky story, and clearly a very thin pretext to suggest that Hamas is not adhering to the agreement, particularly as Israel itself is not adhering to
Well, I
the
mean, isn't it
agreement.
kind of interesting, George, that, they're obsessed with getting the remains of the hostages that died during the last 2 years, but they weren't particularly worried about it up until the ceasefire. They could have done this a year ago easily. Okay. I mean, it's a bit rich. I mean, most likely, we don't know in every single case, but most likely, given the intensity of the bombardment of Gaza, is that it was the Israeli missiles that killed their own captives.
Yep.
That's a fair thing to say. I mean, in every single case, no, we don't know that, but logic would say so. I mean, it's a bit rich, They're dead because of you.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That
And then you'll say, but Peter, well, no, there's a history. There were ceasefires and live captives were released.
right,
Every time there was a real ceasefire, there were
right.
releases. Okay.
Yep.
I mean, and of course, again, I'm saying the obvious, the leverage, that was the only leverage that the Palestinian factions had. So, and plus, um, um, uh, dismantling or making unserviceable equipment to lift rubble to find bodies. Okay. I mean, I think the Egyptians were given the green light. I don't know if they've sent in the equipment yet, but they've been allowed to, you can send in these cranes,
Right.
there are some estimates I've heard too, between 50 and 65 years to take to remove the rubble. And
Right.
you want everything done in 72 hours?
And very interestingly, Israel has also denied permission for Turkey and Qatar to bring in their excavation equipment. Now, it's very difficult to dig up these bodies because of the extraordinary amount of rubble, and this was baked in. That's the important thing. This was
Of
baked
course.
in to the agreements. That's why what Israel is doing is so deceitful, because it was everyone knew that with part of that whole hostage exchange was that it was going to be very difficult to get all of the remains of the bodies out. Also, there isn't any evidence that Hamas executed any of their hostages. I mean, because of the living hostages haven't said, oh, but they were threatening to execute us. We saw them executing
Well,
some
I
others.
mean,
So
one of the
that's why I
things,
think what you said is right. The reason why they're dead, in large part, is that Israel was bombing. It's the missiles that was the biggest danger to the hostages.
again, freed captives, their testimonies essentially line up. The provisions that they were given, food and water, were basically the same as their captives.
Right.
Okay.
That's right. That's right. So here was the story that broke yesterday. It was in it was published by, of course, uh, here the Axios.
Axios, of course.
Yes, and then he says here, Netanyahu orders powerful strikes in Gaza, a ceasefire breaks down. Now, well,
As if the strikes over the last 2 years weren't powerful. Okay.
exactly. This is going to be really powerful. Yeah. And then it says that he had ordered powerful strikes in Gaza Strip immediately in retaliation of what Israeli officials say was a Hamas attack on Israeli forces in the city of Rafah.
But there is no Hamas in Rafah.
Yeah. No, that's right. That's exactly right. And then here we have they sorry. What Israel always does, or at least what the media often do, is they say something as if, and it sounds like this has been authoritatively established, and then you have to go right to the end of the sentence. The Israeli Defense Forces said, so
Instead,
having read, Hamas militants fired anti-tank missiles and conducted sniper fire on Tuesday against Israel forces in the city of Rafah in southern Gaza. Well, that sounds terrible. The Israeli Defense Forces said. How about saying the Israeli Defense Forces claim? That would have a very different effect on
very
the
good.
reader.
Okay.
Most of this area is controlled by the IDF, but some Hamas militants still operate in tunnels in the area. Uh,
Claims the IDF.
exactly, exactly. The attack led to significant.
Everybody, I'm not just trying to be a jerk here, okay? But, you know, when you have only one source, then that's when you have to scratch your head,
Right,
okay?
right.
There may be tunnels George and I are not here to verify things, okay? But, in looking at narratives, if all of your information comes from one single source, then
Yeah,
you have to be extremely skeptical.
yeah, that's exactly right. And After Netanyahu's announcement on the strikes, Hamas's military wing said it was postponed the handover of the deceased hostage it had recovered earlier on Tuesday. Now, as things stand, the ceasefire is back in place, even though about 100 people have been killed in the Israeli strikes. And I think this deceased hostage has been handed over. But let's keep in mind, more than a half of the deceased hostages have now been handed over to Israel. So it's not like, none of them has been handed over. Moreover, the most important part is that all of the living hostages, were handed over. I thought that's more important than the remains. I mean, it's important, obviously, but not as important the fact that the living hostages were handed
But
over.
George, if we take the figure, the range of 50 years to 65 years to remove the rubble, ergo, that means you're going to be finding remains for the
Yeah,
next 50 to 65 years.
right, right.
It's
Exactly.
interesting. Again, we're dealing with a text that is framed to lead you in a certain direction. But George and I always are skeptical. The Hamas's military wing said it would postpone the handover. Now that's interesting. Who are they testing? They're certainly not testing the Israelis, okay? They're testing the Trump administration.
Well, and this
What
is
this is
really
all about.
the key, because all along, whether this agreement survives is entirely dependent on Trump. Totally dependent,
100%.
because
100%.
if Trump takes his eye off the ball, if Trump decides I'm not really very interested in this, then that's it. There's going to be no agreement. Everything we're going to go back to the war in no time, and that's why. And I think that I think Israel is testing
Yes.
what's Trump going to do.
They're all testing Trump.
That's right. Because it's all everything depends on him. Everything because he has the power to maintain this the ceasefire. And the only way he can do it is if he applies pressure against Netanyahu. Now he did it once. There's a question of, well, is he going to do it again?
Well, I mean, but this really begs the question, and I don't want to go down the rabbit hole of Ukraine right now. George and I have spent thousands of hours on it. But I mean, we, it seems to me that the way Trump frames all of this is he got a ceasefire, ergo, it's a win. I'm basically done. And he's still working towards a ceasefire in Ukraine, which would
Yeah, right.
ergo mean a win. And see, this is something that somebody has to grab him by the collar and say, winning is not the same
No,
as
no, no, no.
fire is still not
Yeah,
the same thing as a
and that
peace.
but that wasn't then when he went to Sharm el Sheikh. All the understanding on the part of Sisi, on the part of Erdogan, on Qatar, everybody. This is a peace agreement. This is a multi-phase peace agreement, and it has
Why
all
do you think they went there? To
exactly
remind him.
on a
Remember the
ceasefire.
photo
Yeah,
op, Donald. Remember the photo op. We were all standing there.
that's right, exactly. Everything they were saying was that we have to move towards phase two. And Egypt is doing that. Egypt is now already putting together a team of Palestinian technocrats. Apparently, it's already put together a list of potential leaders who would run Palestine or run the Gaza Strip in the coming weeks. Now, that's just a list that has to be approved, but it's already done that. But Egypt knows, hey, we have to move to phase two. But the more you,
And I'm glad. I mean, I don't want to be misunderstood here. I think Trump's plan is god awful. I can't see how it's workable. But as George and I have agreed, it's the only game in town
right,
right now.
right,
Okay,
right,
so I have to work with it. I have no other choice. But what I'd like to be seeing right now, George, internationalizing this through the
yeah,
UN, through the
yes,
Security Council. That's what I want to see.
right,
If this is the only game in town, then let's do it.
right,
Okay.
right. That's right. It has to be. But the point is, Trump put forward this 20-point plan. Now, well, the point about the 20-point plan is that all of it has to be implemented. It's not a la carte. Not,
Yeah.
well, we like these bits and pieces, but we'll ignore all the rest. It's
That's
a package, all
We're
20.
not in the supermarket, everybody.
Exactly.
Okay? The bill of sale has already been made.
That's right. And when you listen to Marco Rubio, and we've talked about Marco Rubio, the slimy Marco Rubio who went to Israel last week, it's clear the only part he's interested in is, oh, disarming Hamas. Oh, Hamas needs to disarm. That's one part of the plan. But there's 19 other points to the plan, and they're not going to disarm if they're likely to be attacked by Israel. And that's, of course, the whole point. Israel attacks, the Hamas says, well, we're not going to disarm. I mean, Israel is attacking us. I mean, what kind of an idiot disarms when the other side is attacking? And then, of course, that'll be the justification for abandoning the whole thing altogether and proclaiming Hamas did not disarm. They're violating Trump's agreement.
Again, we go full circle. And
That's
George
right.
is going to agree with me on this. It's up to Trump.
Yep. Um, And then, so here's Emma says, we confirm that any Zionist escalation will hinder the search, excavation, recovery of the bodies. Yes. I mean, how the hell are we going to go, doing excavation when we're likely to be killed doing that? Which will lead to a delay in the occupation's recovery of the bodies of its dead. Very, very logical. Um, and then Israeli officials claim Hamas is dragging its feet on returning the remains of 13 hostages still held in Gaza. On Saturday, Trump called on Hamas to start returning the bodies of the deceased hostages, including two Americans, quickly, and stressed that if they don't, other countries involved in this great peace will take action. Not on this, they won't. Not on this, they won't. I mean, they know perfectly well that it's a long process, and they know that this was baked into the deal. Trump acknowledged that some of the bodies are hard to reach, but stressed that others can return now, and for some reason they are not. He said he'd watch closely over the next 48 hours. And then here, And then on Monday, several hours before Trump's 48-hour window closed, Hamas delivered the remains of an Israeli hostage. But a day later, Israel said Hamas had actually handed over body parts from a hostage whose remains Israel had partially recovered more than a year ago. This wretched video thing that Israel is going on about, where it's clear there's a confusion that's involved because Israel wasn't even aware of this. He wasn't one of the hostages on the list to be exchanged. So this happened subsequently that Hamas had to reburied and then exhumed the bodies, and they had a drone footage. Oh, Hamas is lying. I mean, lying about what? I mean, this is absolutely nonsensical that they're lying about something. Oh, that means they can find the bodies. Doesn't mean
Well,
that
what
at all.
interest is
But they've used that so that Smotrich can go on television and start screaming, Hamas is violating the agreement.
why in the world does Hamas want to retain corpses? It
No,
doesn't
no
make
reason.
any sense at
Right.
all.
Um, Netanyahu said in a statement on Tuesday that this had been a violation of the peace deal. And then here is the story in the Sun in the Irish Times. This is very important because this makes clear that the ceasefire plan called for all hostages alive and deceased to be returned within 72 hours. That was within the Trump 20-point plan. 72 hours of the agreement's acceptance, but provided a mechanism if that did not happen, saying that Hamas should share information about any remaining deceased hostages and, quote, exert maximum effort to ensure the fulfillment of these commitments as soon as possible. So, in other words, it was in that agreement. Now, that agreement hasn't been published. So, this is all kind of, we're getting it from various sources. What was in that um, the hostage prisoner exchange agreement. We know what was in the 20-point plan, but the fact was clear that Hamas has to share information as to where the remains may be, and then others can come in and help exhume them. So exert, look at this. This is a very vague formulation. Exert maximum effort to ensure the fulfillment of those commitments as soon as possible. Where's the evidence Hamas has not done that?
Well, I mean, when it was maximum effort, I mean, like using our hands to move boulders. I mean,
Exactly. Digging it up with your hands. That's right.
yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a long process. Um, anyway, then the ICRC acknowledged that delays could be expected, describing handing over the remains of all hostages as a massive challenge given the difficulties of finding bodies amidst the territory's rubble. But I always love it when they talk about the rubble. There's just rubble lying around.
Yeah.
Oh, there's just some rubble. Look, there's rubble here.
Yes, as if nature created itself. Yeah.
Um, and then here, this is from the Times of Israel. It says, report, Netanyahu sought to strike Gaza before today's attack on IDF troops. Huh. But US objected. So in other words, here it's clear that this whole thing about the attack on the IDF troops was just a ruse. Netanyahu sought to strike Gaza before the attack. And this is Times of Israel. This isn't Max Blumenthal. This is actually a very
Well,
pro-government paper.
this doesn't surprise me at all. What I think is interesting from this slide is that there's at some level, somewhere in the Trump administration, there's very, very close coordination with the
Yeah,
Israelis because they wanted to, Netanyahu sought to strike Gaza before today's attack, so-called attack, but the U.S. objected.
right.
So you can't say you're not involved in this here. There seems to be a very, very close coordination going on
There's,
here.
there's close coordination, but they also know that it hangs by a thread. This ceasefire could just collapse. And if it does, they've got a problem on their hands, and I think that's why they realize this. And so and they are quite concerned. I mean, I think I have to be concerned because if it just collapses, boom, that's your main foreign policy accomplishment gone. No one's gonna No one's going to say this is the man who brought peace between Cambodia and Thailand. Um, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu initially hesitated to authorize a military response in Gaza over Hamas's ceasefire violations due to resistance from the US, but chose to do so after the attack on troops in Rafa, Channel 12 reports, citing Israeli and American officials. Discussions took place between the Prime Minister's office and the White House throughout the day over how to respond to Hamas's failure to return the bodies of deceased hostages still held in Gaza. Hours before the Rafa attack, Netanyahu had been seeking a green light from President Trump for a military response to Hamas, but had not received one before the incident occurred. So that makes it very convenient. So he's going to Trump and saying, give us the green light to attack because they're violating this agreement. He doesn't get the green light. And lo and behold, hey, there's an attack in Rafah. Can we have our green light now, please?
Meanwhile, everyone, there's only a trickle of aid going in to Gaza. It is so little, it really makes very little difference. Okay, so here you're demanding Hamas, lay down its arms, find dead bodies, and oh, there's no supper tonight.
Um, Earlier in the day, Israel shared with Washington and the CIA the IDF released drone video. Here we go. This is the video again, showing Hamas terror operatives staging the recovery of a hostage's body returned the previous night, arguing it constituted a ceasefire violation. I have no idea, even if this is genuine, how this constitutes a ceasefire violation. I mean, the fact that they buried the body and then exhumed the body, they exhumed it. So how is this a violation? I don't even get it. Even if this wasn't a whole phony nonsense,
George,
but
did you see the video?
I didn't look at the video. No. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I haven't either. I'm really not interested in seeing such horrific things. But I mean, I'm sorry. My first inclination is that maybe they staged it.
Well, that could well be, but it seems like there was just confusion about this body because Israel was completely unaware of it because they'd already. I mean, this
At
body was
least
already
part
in,
of it.
exactly. It was
Gee,
in several pieces, so
what a
Israel already had
terrible,
some pieces of the body, and this was the remains of that body.
terrible.
So the basic it was Israel wasn't even aware of this body, and so I guess Hamas, they found these remains. They sort of reburied and say, hey, look, we found another hostage, and but it was Israel that had not listed this body as one of the hostages whose remains they were demanding. So so it's hard to see what the violation is. And they would demand, and Israel wanted to attack Gaza on the basis of this. And the senior Trump administration officials, however, told their Israeli counterparts that they did not view the footage as a clear breach. In fact, they were kind of a little baffled. Well, what are you talking about? Where's the breach? And urged Israel not to take radical measures that could risk collapsing the truce, according to the report. Instead, they suggested issuing a tougher ultimatum to Hamas to return the bodies within 72 hours, after which Israel would receive U.S. green light to act or expand the IDF's yellow line of control inside Gaza. See, this is what happens. This is the way Israel operates. They push and they push and they push, and then it says, "Oh, well, we don't see that this is a breach, but okay, give them a 72-hour ultimatum, and if they don't come up with the bodies in 72 hours, then you can go and bomb." All right,
All right. Oh,
nah,
and
we'll
on
do it.
top, I don't know. I've heard different numbers. Is it 57% that the
Yeah, well,
Israelis?
we'll come to that.
Oh,
They've
okay.
gone up.
All
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah. And then so in his initial meeting with defense officials today, no response was approved by Netanyahu. And he emphasized that Israel should engage with Washington before proceeding. So he meets these and said, "Do we have the green light? We don't have the goddamn green light." Um, it's not clear who he dealt with. I mean, Trump is in Asia right now. Marco Rubio is with him in Asia, so it's we don't know who exactly he dealt with in
Maybe
the
it's Steve
White
Witkoff
House.
who
I don't know if
it.
I don't think it was Witkoff. I mean, because I think Witkoff is more of the pragmat. Witkoff has obviously a vested interest in trying to keep this going for as long as possible. Maybe Sebastian Gorka. I don't think he was taken to Asia with the president.
It's interesting. He's being kept under wraps. I think they
Yes, he is. Yes, he is. He is.
first few days, or he just ran his mouth too much, and I think they realized this is it's like Tammy Bruce. It's like we need to maybe promote her and get her out of the way. Yeah.
Exactly. Kicked upstairs. Um, um, Following the Rafa attack, however, Netanyahu held a smaller security cabinet session during which he decided to renew airstrikes in Gaza and advance plans to expand the Yellow Line,
Online.
moves which are now at the center of ongoing talks with the Trump administration on how far Israel should go. So you can see what he's done here. So he cooks up this whole fake nonsense, about with this drone video. Say they violated the agreement. Can we attack? The administration said, we don't see the violation. But okay, if you insist, give them a 72-hour ultimatum. Netanyahu doesn't seem to want to wait 72 hours and says, hey, look, there's an attack in Rafa. We're under attack. We have to do something. And that gets the attention of the administration. So, oh, well, if you're under attack, you need to respond. You hit back. How convenient that this happens really on the same day and just within hours of this demand for a green light. Um, uh,
Again, they for 2 years they had very little interest in living
right,
captives, and now they want to break the ceasefire over
right,
dead ones. Really.
right, right. Um, and then this is Hamas's denial of the involvement in the shooting in Rafah. The Palestinian group rejected any connection to what Israel describes as a shooting in Rafah. The continuing bombing in Gaza represents a flagrant violation of the ceasefire agreement signed in Sharm el-Sheikh under the auspices of President Trump, Hamas said. And then it called the attack an extension of a series of violations committed over the past few days, including attacks that resulted in deaths and injuries and the continued closure of the Rafah crossing, which confirms the insistence on violating the terms of the agreement and attempting to sabotage it.
Well, I think part of the agreement was opening the Rafa
I
crossing,
think
but
so too. Yeah. Um, the group called on ceasefire guarantors to take immediate action to pressure Israel to stop its assault and oblige it to abide by all the provisions of the deal. So Trump is in Asia. He's focusing on all this trade deals and whatever. So there's no one to mind the shop in Washington. So this is a nice opportunity for Netanyahu essentially to do what he needs to do to sabotage the agreement because he's laying the groundwork. I mean,
right.
basically, he can't just simply walk out on the agreement immediately. He has to lay the groundwork for
I
the
did
eventual.
everything I could, but Israel's a victim again.
Yes,
We're a
exactly.
victim.
Yeah,
That's how they're going to play it, right?
right, right. And then here, Times of Israel. Israel set to decide to take over more Gazan territory in response to Hamas violations. And Prime Minister Netanyahu has decided to expand the territory under IDF control in the Gaza Strip after repeated Hamas violations of the ceasefire agreement. Um, the Prime Minister's office declines to comment on the reports. According to the Khan public broadcaster, Netanyahu is speaking with senior U.S. officials in order to coordinate the move.
See how this narrative works,
Yeah,
everyone?
yeah,
Look at the
yeah.
first
That's
sentence there.
yeah.
After Gaza Strip, after repeated Hamas violation. Now, George and I worked up to this. I mean, was it a violation?
Right.
A
Yeah.
very elastic
Very,
definition of
very elastic.
violation.
I mean,
And then here we are, repeated Hamas violations.
repeated Hamas violations, and particularly as we've looked through it, we said even the Americans are not persuaded by that whole drone video story. We looked at the story about what were Hamas's obligations which is, hey, you just do your best, locate possible locations where the remains may be buried, and then somebody who has the excavation equipment can come in and exhume the bodies. Um, so there's no where's the violation? There was it was understood from the beginning that Hamas would not be able to find all the remains within 72 hours. I mean, that was, they could find the living hostages, but the remains of the dead hostages, they couldn't find them in 72 hours. So there's no violation, and yet it gets repeated. And then it gets recirculated in media about Hamas's violations. Um, and then that's up. So now I think it's up to 58% that Israel is occupying of Gaza. So
Well,
now
George, once occupied, they don't tend to give back.
they don't tend to give back. Now the problem is now, of course, as things stand, the ceasefire is back on. So the 10 a.m. I think local time, Israel said, okay, ceasefire back on. I think Hamas has returned. There's the body of the remains of one of the hostages, but it's step by step, you are creating the conditions for an eventual withdrawal from the agreement. And that will happen unless Trump gets his hands around this. I mean, Trump will
Yes,
have to
and
really get personally involved in this.
on top of it, the longer phase one that we're in right now, the longer it goes on, the Israelis say, well, why should we even consider phase two? We're still in phase one.
Right,
I mean, let's not get ahead of our skis now, everyone.
right,
Okay. No,
right,
this is intentional because what Trump needs for this plan, which again, have a lot of problems with, what the key element he needs to succeed, however we define that term, is momentum. And the Israelis are blunting that
right.
momentum over and over and over again.
Yes, the momentum is key because you first of all you need to set up this um, Palestinian government of technocrats. Now, as I said, Egypt has put forward this team. They have a list of the Palestinians who could form this the government. Once you have that in place, then of course you can move on to the next part, which is, well, you have to have an oversight board, but even more important, you have to have the international security force. Because somebody has to take care of security. But these are all key ingredients of the plan. You can't just simply say, oh, well, Hamas needs to disarm, as if somehow, well, within the context of the overall plan. And when Rubio went to Israel, Rubio deliberately, he's not a stupid person. He deliberately somehow, forgot about every other part of the plan and just simply started talking about disarming Hamas. Well, they're not going to disarm if there's no movement towards the
Look,
rest of the plan.
there's a number of moving pieces simultaneously. George has already mentioned one of them, getting some kind of technocratic administration. That is absolutely key
Right,
because who's going to administer aid distribution? UNRWA is not allowed there.
right,
Other humanitarian groups dealing with aid are not allowed there. I
right,
mean, is Israel going to do it? Well, that's not going to work because they have their policy as little as possible, as little as they can get away with. They need a functioning, and in the eyes of the Palestinian people, even if it's temporary,
right,
a board, they can say, look, I mean, here are the storage, here are the warehouses. This is where you can go. We'll take
right,
it from there. Okay. I
right,
mean, is that it sounds kind of mundane, but it's absolutely urgent right now.
right. Yes, yes, and that's right. The other thing, of course, is this, which again Rubio deliberately lied about. He said, "Oh, Hamas can have play no role at all in the future of Gaza." Well, uh, Hamas as an organ,
Easier said than
yeah,
done.
but Hamas, all right, Hamas as a political organization cannot be involved in the running of Gaza, but individual Hamas members according to that plan, they can take part in the governance of Gaza as long as they disarm and as long as they accept, non-violence. They can take part in government. There's not,
Like, who's going to deliver the mail?
exactly.
You know?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, very simple bureaucrats.
right.
Okay, the Gaza Health Ministry. I mean, some is who's going to run that?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. All of it. I mean,
All of it.
right. The desalination plants, the sewage works, the hospitals, all of it. Somebody has to run these institutions, and of course, somebody is going to have to be involved in the beginning of the clearing of the rubble. Obviously, they're going to be
And who would be that? It would be some kind of police force.
right,
Okay, okay.
right,
And who is the police force now?
right. The police force, and of course, the thing about the police force, which is and what Hamas is now doing, is that there are these gangsters, the looters, the rapists, the criminals who are
Some on the Israeli dime.
exactly they were all set up by Israel as a rival group to Hamas, and of course, when Israel withdrew from the territories, then Hamas returned and said these gangsters need to be removed. I mean, so what's better to have these criminals, looters? These were the people who were doing the looting. It wasn't Hamas who was doing the looting, the aid. These were the people looting it, and they removed them, and so maybe brutally, whatever, but
Yeah, yeah.
they
I
were
mean,
criminals.
we have a very elastic definition of removal here. Okay.
Yes. Okay. I mean, it was made brutal. Maybe there was summary executions. It's a tough neighborhood. So, so these things may well have happened, but nonetheless, and even Trump was aware of this. Trump was actually aware. Yeah, some of these are bad guys. Hamas. Okay, so Hamas.
George, it tells us again. We get these glimpses every once in a while. Every once in a while, Trump will blurt something out like that, and it's like, so you do know what's going
Right.
on here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't think his handlers like maybe you shouldn't have said that, Mr. President, okay? But
Right.
Trump was told it and he just let it go,
Right.
okay? And
Right.
he's just like, yeah, it's complicated. It's a complicated situation, isn't
Right.
it?
Right.
And of
Right.
course, the Israelis don't want it to be complicated at all.
No, 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 no. That's right. Because they say, well, oh no, it's all Hamas, which is what again, Marco Rubio. Marco Rubio is now a person just repeating Israel talking points. That's all he does. He just repeats and repeats everything that Israel tells him, and so that's it. The only thing that matters is dismantlement of Hamas. Nothing else
Because
matters.
only Israel can get him elected president of the United States. He knows it.
he, that's right. Um, but when
It's so amazing how he's willing to choose between MAGA and Israel. He does it on snap of a finger. He just no doubt in his mind.
yes,
Amazing.
that's cool. It's a quite an interesting. It's a the is he is an Israel firster. He's very quite quite cleverly presented himself as an America
Well,
first
he is
in his early days.
he's a lobby project.
That's right. That's right. And so here he is. He goes there, repeats all the platitudes that Israel tells him. He has the script, and of course that's what Israel wants. Israel wants somebody on the inside who's just simply always just going to go on repeating everything you say. But you're absolutely right. When with Trump, he does something. He realizes he does know. I think I'm being played by Netanyahu. I get the impression he would say, that Bibi is playing me. Bibi is not being entirely honest with me. He becomes aware of it, but then he doesn't seem to register. You think, well, if you know this, if you know that Israel has installed these gangsters in Gaza, the worst criminal elements. According to your own words, these are some of the worst criminal elements who are now running Gaza on the direction of Israel. Then maybe you should reconsider your implacable support for this.
That's why, George, I keep stressing this point because if this is going to work, and it's highly unlikely it will, internationalize it on steroids. Okay, what I'm trying to get at here is that spread out the risk, okay, and then when you're spreading out risk, you're spreading out responsibility too,
Right,
okay, because somebody, given what my theory of the case, by internationalizing, it'll take the heat off of Trump himself.
right,
Okay,
right,
I mean, you say, well, it's a UN Security Council resolution.
right,
Okay, meaning they all have a stake in
right.
this. Okay,
Yeah,
and that will blunt
right.
Netanyahu. But I don't know if we're ever going to get there.
I don't know if we're going
I
to
don't
get
know
there.
how many times, George, we're going to say it's early days. I have no idea. I really don't.
This it's only taken 2 weeks to get us to this point. I mean, that's pretty fast. I thought it would, it would take a little bit longer than that. But the thing was that when he went to Sharm el Sheikh, and then he signed the Sharm el Sheikh Declaration. Netanyahu wasn't part of the declaration. The Sharm el-Sheikh declaration, the United States, Turkey, Qatar, Egypt. So it was basically these are the guarantors of this agreement. Well, if they're the guarantors, then they all have to absolutely take part in this. And therefore, and I think the guarantors know that we have to move to the next phase. Otherwise, that's it. Otherwise, it's just going to collapse. In a lot of recrimination. Oh, we didn't get this back, or we didn't get that back, and then Israel starts moving back into Gaza. Oh well, they violated the
Yeah,
agreement.
because everybody wait for the phrase. Drum roll, please. We don't have a partner. We don't have
That's
a
right.
partner. George and I have heard that our entire adult life.
Right.
Okay. We don't have a partner for peace.
Right. 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 Right.
It's the what is so stressful in looking at all this is that Trump has owned it. This is Trump 100%, and it's really we're all waiting to see if he's going to come through. Okay. Um, Obviously, we have our doubts. George and I, other topic as viewers know, George and I have covered the Ukraine situation thoroughly, granularly, and this sudden shift is like
Right.
inexplicable. I
It is.
mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I've heard all the explanations. None of them make any
None of
sense.
them make any sense. Exactly. Um, uh, Now, Trump's problem is that if this ceasefire does indeed break down, completely break down. In other words, it just becomes, everything's just back on. It's going to be very hard for him. It's going to be hard for him to walk it back and say, "Oh, we can resolve this."
Would
I
you
can
say
get.
that applies to Ukraine right now?
I think that's right. Oh, just one more phone call. I'll put in a phone call to CC. I'll get on to Erdogan because they're going to say, well, why, we're not going to go out on a limb for this. I mean,
We already
they
did.
already did it once. We're going to do it again. We're going to be made to look fools yet again. I mean, that's it. We thought this was that you are seriously committed to this agreement, and that was the premise. They would not have gone to Sharm el Sheikh and signed that declaration with Trump unless they believed Trump was seriously committed, and seriously committed means you will apply pressure on Netanyahu, and
See, and this is the problem we face when seeing it repeat in different parts of the world, is that okay, I have no George and I have made but no secret that we admire strong, decisive leaders in history. Okay, now Trump he thinks of himself as a world historic figure. Fine, that's all right with me. I have no problem with that. Okay, as long as you have follow through. Now, a different track that you can take is institutionalizing it, international law. Dot the I's and cross the T's, get it airtight, get everybody's signature. I mean, there are different trajectories, okay?
right,
Trump has chose the heroic figure
right,
trajectory,
right,
and it's rife with risk.
right. That's right. That's right. But you see, the key is clearly the key event that got him to the Sharm el Sheikh was
Qatar.
what he did with Qatar. He suddenly applied this real pressure against Netanyahu. He publicly humiliated Netanyahu. He issued that Article 5 like guarantee to Qatar. And I think that showed them, said, okay, well, look, Trump is serious. No one has done this to Netanyahu before. No one has
Just as a
publicly.
footnote, George, because you know I have to run in about 5 minutes.
Okay,
Just a question to you because I only saw parts. I didn't see the entire interview on 60 Minutes with Jared Kushner and Steve Witkoff. What Witkoff and Kushner had to say about the Israeli attack on Qatar was really quite revealing for
that's
me. I
right.
was a bit surprised.
Yeah,
The reason why I bring that up is that do you see again who's around Trump and what information he gets, we don't know. But it seems to me that Kushner and Witkoff thought, "Whoa, this is way beyond anything we
right,
signed up for. That this is way beyond
right,
outside the lines here." And I wonder if it's those two and others saying, look, Mr. President, this is something we cannot tolerate because it's going to destroy the entire fabric of the Middle East.
yeah,
Okay. And I
yeah,
wonder if that's where Trump, he listened to those guys because
yeah,
you're right. I mean, his reaction to the bombing of Qatar was it was laser
right,
directed, it was focused, no misunderstanding, no ambiguity.
right.
Every once in a while, we get that from this guy.
Right, exactly. You get that. But once he does that, then surely the penny will drop that
Come on,
this
come
is
on, come on.
you have to do more of this. You see what happens when you apply serious pressure against him. He buckles. He does a public humiliation. Netanyahu doesn't do that. He doesn't go around apologizing. I've never heard him apologize. He was forced to apologize because essentially Trump suddenly realized, yeah, I can tell him we're cutting you off completely. Oh, so you now do realize that you can cut him off completely, and if you cut him off completely, he's on his own. Israel is on his
Yeah,
own.
the,
You're
the, the,
facing
the
the
problem
entire
is
world, and you don't have your big supporter behind you.
the problem is it's Netanyahu has the ground advantage is that he's got people in the Trump administration do a lot of his dirty work for him. Okay, Trump is again in his second term. This is something George and I watched. In the first thing he's all by himself in many ways
Right.
in office. Okay. And every once in a while, he's emboldened and he actually exerts the influence and power that he has. It's a mystery to us, not 10 months in, why he doesn't do it more often.
That's right. That's exactly right.
All right.
Yeah.
I that well, okay. We're watching it very closely. I can't give up on hope. Call me a fool.
No, I
Call
think
me.
I, I think we
Well,
should.
fine. Go ahead. That's all right.
I think there's no. I think as you put it very well, there's no other show in town. This is the agreement, and I think everyone. I think I'm sure that's exactly what Sisi thinks, some Erdogan thinks. They probably think Netanyahu dealing with him is just impossible. But there's no alternative. I mean, if do you have another plan or another mechanism to bring this to an end? No, there isn't. So this is the only thing we have, and that means we have to essentially keep applying the pressure against Trump, so that he can then apply a pressure against Netanyahu.
I
But they
think
probably as skeptical or as critical as we are.
there's a magazine called Vogue. I don't read it, okay, but it is very, very popular.
The fashion
And
magazine.
they have a Woman of the Year, Miss Rachel. And maybe those of you that have children, she does these children videos. She has billions of views. As someone pointed out to me, if you have a child that likes one of those songs, you're going to play it over and over, I mean, hundreds of times. This woman is a megastar and she's embraced the Palestinian plight without being overtly political. She doesn't blame, she doesn't get involved. I don't know if she's ever said Hamas in her life, okay? And this is mainstream, okay? And she is their Woman of the Year. There is a huge cultural shift going on in the web, huge.
Right.
Okay. Norman Finkelstein thinks it's ephemeral. I'm not sure I agree with Norman on this one here, but there's a lot of moving pieces, and another good reason for Trump to be Trumpian.
No, I,
Okay.
I agree. I also don't think I used to think that it was ephemeral, but I think there's something much more that's going on here.
And of
Think,
course,
think, yeah, because
I'm sure we'll talk about it in the future.
exactly. There are things
That's all
things
the
going
time
on.
I have.
Yeah, that's right. Things are going on now that was unthinkable even
Un-
a few years ago.
Unthinkable.
Yeah,
And that's a good thing.
yeah.
All right, this is the Gaggle with Peter and George. We're on Locals, so please go to thegaggle.locals.com. This is Wednesday. George and I will reconvene on Friday and Sunday, and I will make a triumphant return to our live stream on Monday.
Exactly. And in the meantime, there's the problem issue of the dogs are saying, yeah, speaking of triumphant, the one thing that we can't say is triumphant is the tip jar. That there's no triumph there. Buddy has this way of expressing himself. It's a bad habit. So to push the tip jar into an exultant, triumphant state of tip jarism. Please, anything you've got, bung it into the tip jar, whatever. Any money lying around, just spare nothing, or everything into the tip jar. We're very grateful for all of your help, friendship, and support. The more you're able to donate, the more of these videos we can make, the more we can improve on the technology. And above all, we're trying to get Buddy into a kind of a less belligerent frame of mind. It's going to be very difficult. So remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye bye.